She tried to break me into 1,000 pieces, but I transformed each one of them into strength to win. I never imagined my own home could become a silent battlefield. I grew up surrounded by perfect images of family, birthday parties with forced smiles, happy photos on social media, and constant praise from relatives about how close we were. But behind these photos, there was a weight no one saw. I remember coming home from school and feeling butterflies in my stomach, a mixture of fear and tension that seemed to permanently settle within me. My sister Marina, 2 years older, had a dominating presence that always made everyone around us feel small. At first, it was just teasing, sharp comments, or small jokes that made me uncomfortable. But over time, the hostility escalated, shoving insults and humiliations that emotionally isolated me within my own home. What confused me most was the fact that my mother, Vanessa, although present, seemed unable to see the gravity of what was happening, and my father, Gustavo, concerned about the family's image, preferred to minimize conflicts rather than confront them. I found myself alone, trying to figure out if I was overreacting or if something was truly wrong. The feeling of helplessness constantly haunted me, and I began to build an internal armor, a silent defense that allowed me to continue my daily life without completely falling apart. This was my routine before everything changed, and I had no idea how much my own strength would be tested. I was a teenager, trying to hide behind sports, basketball, as if the court could protect me from the emotional chaos that reigned within my home. Every dribble, every run across the field gave me a temporary sense of freedom. But when I returned home, reality swallowed me up again. Marina always seemed lurking, ready to turn any mistake of mine into punishment or humiliation. I felt a mixture of anger and fear, emotions I didn't know how to process. It was impossible to explain to anyone outside. My classmates and friends didn't understand what was happening, and I didn't have the courage to tell them. Silence became my shield, and I learned to smile at everyone while the storm raged within. It was during this period that I realized my resilience was beginning to form. Despite everything, I maintained good grades, participated in practices, and tried to appear normal. But the internal tension grew with each passing day. I began having frequent nightmares, experiencing constant anxiety and a feeling of worthlessness that seemed to erode my self-esteem. Little by little, I realized that I needed to find some emotional outlet that was more lasting than sports, something that could sustain me even when I was alone. The breaking point began silently, like a series of small fissures that would become deep cracks. Marina became more aggressive, controlling not only my movements, but also my words and actions. If I tried to defend myself, or even express an opinion, I was immediately repressed with shouts or sarcasm. I felt like any misstep could trigger an explosion of rage. The feeling of being constantly at the mercy of someone who should have been my sister was suffocating. I began to question my own perception of reality, wondering if I was overreacting, if I truly deserved what was happening. I felt trapped in my own room, which was both a refuge and a prison. My social life began to narrow. I avoided friends, events, and situations that might generate conflict that Marina could use against me. Even in sports, I felt an invisible pressure, as if failure were inevitable, and my sister was always watching to mock or criticize. With each passing day, guilt, shame, and fear mingled, making it difficult to breathe emotionally. My mother, even unintentionally, often reinforced this dynamic by trying to maintain a facade of normalcy. She told me Marina was just more emotional, that we needed to be patient, that the family needed to be united. But I knew something was deeply wrong. I began to realize it wasn't just about my flaws or my sensitivity, but about my sister's need for control and my parents' silent omission. I felt invisible, as if my feelings and suffering were irrelevant. At the same time, I felt angry at myself for not being able to face the situation, for hiding, for allowing everything to continue this way. This duality between fear and anger gnawed at my mind, turning each day into a silent battle. I needed to survive emotionally, learn to protect myself, and at the same time, I didn't know where to begin. The feeling of being alone in the world, even at home, was overwhelming. It was at this point that I began to realize that my inner strength might be my only way out. I knew I needed to find ways to endure, not just physically, but emotionally. With every basketball practice, every run, every moment I focused on studying, I was unknowingly building tools of resilience. I learned to observe, identify behavioral patterns, and anticipate outbursts of anger, creating daily survival strategies. Still, there were days when everything seemed futile, when the weight of fear and guilt threatened to crush me. I understood that I needed support, but I didn't know how to ask for it. The feeling of isolation was constant, and even in moments of apparent calm, my body and mind remained tense, as if something might explode at any moment. Deep down, I knew I was at the beginning of a long journey of overcoming, and that, even without realizing it, this experience would begin to shape the person I would become in the future. My name is Leonardo, and all of this happened when I was about 15 years old. I was a sophomore in high school, trying to balance my studies and basketball practice, but with the constant feeling that my emotional life was on the verge of collapse. Before this time, I saw my home as a refuge, a safe place, but everything gradually changed. Every corner, every room seemed charged with tension. The air seemed heavier, the looks more judgmental. Marina became a relentless presence, watching my every move, ready to find fault and punish me, often physically. The house, which should have been a place of comfort, became a silent battlefield, and I, as an isolated teenager, had to learn to survive emotionally without anyone truly understanding what was going on. I felt fear, anger, and a deep sadness, feelings I couldn't share. My mother, Vanessa, remained blind to the gravity of the situation, trying to maintain the image of a perfect family, while my father, Gustavo, avoided conflict, concerned only with appearances in front of friends and family. I felt that, even among my own family, I was completely alone, and this loneliness forced me to develop an emotional resilience that I didn't yet know would be essential to my survival. The escalation of the abuse began to become more explicit and painful. Marina, in her outbursts of rage, didn't hesitate to humiliate or physically harm me, always accompanied by words that cut like razors, insults about my intelligence, my body, my character. Each comment was calculated to make me doubt myself, to leave me vulnerable. I tried to remain calm, but each attack corroded me from within. During this time, school became my only place of respite, but even there, I felt my mind constantly overloaded, filled with memories and fears that followed me like shadows. At basketball practice, I tried to channel my frustration, transforming anger into physical strength, but there were days when anxiety paralyzed me, leaving me breathless and afraid I wouldn't be able to handle what awaited me at home. I began to realize that my mind and body needed survival strategies. It was at this moment that I began to discreetly write down thoughts and feelings that I couldn't share, building a way to organize my inner chaos and find some clarity amidst the emotional turmoil. My emotional health began to show clear signs of wear and tear, insomnia, constant anxiety, and a feeling of helplessness that seemed to grow with each passing day. Every step I took inside the house was calculated, every word measured to avoid provocation. But even then, there were no guarantees. Marina found loopholes, invented situations, distorted events, always to place me in a position of guilt and inferiority. I felt constantly on edge, but I had to keep going. The fear of speaking out was overwhelming. I didn't want to expose my family, nor cause further shame or punishment. The feeling of being trapped in an endless cycle of abuse and silence consumed me. No matter how hard I tried to protect myself, tension lingered even in small moments, like during meals, small talk, or studying. My spirit began to resent the impossibility of simply being myself, and the urge to disappear, to disconnect from reality, arose frequently. Still, there was a small flame inside me that refused to go out, the idea that I could survive and somehow find a way out. The turning point began with a specific incident that changed everything. Marina, in a fit of rage during an argument, seriously injured herself with a hair straightener. The shock and gravity of the incident opened the eyes of my parents and the school to something I had tried to hide for years. It was a moment of shock, fear, and also of quiet relief. Finally, someone would realize what I was going through. The police and social services entered our routine, bringing Catherine, the detective in charge, and social workers Nicola and Kathy. For the first time, I felt I wasn't alone. There were eyes that saw, ears that listened, and professionals prepared to act. Despite the chaos and public exposure, something inside me began to unravel, the hope that my pain could be acknowledged and that I could have some kind of justice and protection. I felt fear, yes, but also a sense of relief and a new energy to face what lay ahead. At the same time, I faced an intense emotional dilemma. Marina wasn't just my abuser, she was also my sister, and I didn't wish her suffering. There was an internal conflict between anger and compassion, between justice and forgiveness. I needed to learn to separate the person from the behavior, and this required emotional maturity that I was still developing. Each counseling session, each conversation with Catherine, Nicholas, and Kathy helped me understand that I wasn't wrong for feeling afraid, that I didn't deserve to be punished by someone who held power over me. I learned to verbalize my feelings, to recognize my worth, and most importantly, to believe that my voice deserved to be heard. This learning was crucial for me to begin rebuilding my identity and self-esteem, scars that the abuse had tried to erase. Gradually, I realized that overcoming would not be a sudden event, but a daily journey, marked by small victories, discrete achievements, and the growth of my emotional resilience. The beginning of my reconstruction was a slow and painful process. The sessions with the social workers and Catherine forced me to confront memories I'd tried to bury. Every detail I recalled of Marina's abuse caused me anguish, but at the same time, it strengthened me. For the first time, I realized my pain had value, that my experience was valid and deserved attention. Learning to talk about feelings I'd held back for years was simultaneously liberating and terrifying. I felt shame, fear of exposing my family, but also an urgent need to assert myself, to show that I wasn't weak or to blame for what was happening. During this period, basketball continued to be my escape valve, but now with a clearer purpose. It wasn't just to escape the suffering, but to remind me of my own strength and discipline. Each practice became a ritual of resistance, of affirming who I was and what I could achieve. My relationship with Marina underwent complex transformations. She, in turn, began to face the consequences of her actions, and the therapy sessions revealed that there was pain and confusion within her as well. The anger I felt alternated with feelings of empathy and a desire for reconciliation. It wasn't easy. Every contact with her could trigger memories of humiliation and fear. But little by little, I realized that my overcoming depended not solely on punishment or distancing myself, but on my ability to set clear boundaries and maintain my own emotional sanity. I learned to communicate without aggression to express my point of view, and most importantly, to recognize that my worth was not determined by my sister's behavior. This understanding gave me the strength to face everyday life with greater confidence, and although there were still moments of tension, my mind was less trapped in the constant anxiety that had previously dominated me. One of the biggest challenges was dealing with my parents' perceptions. Vanessa and Gustavo had to face their own flaws and accept that neglecting my pain had real consequences. There were moments of frustration and disappointment when I felt it was impossible to rebuild trust. But as they engaged in family sessions, I began to see small changes, genuine attention to my needs, support in difficult times, and a sincere effort to balance fairness and affection. I realized that overcoming grief also involves learning to accept that others can make mistakes and still try to improve. I learned to recognize genuine intentions and differentiate human failure from ill will. And this became a powerful life lesson, showing that relationships can be rebuilt even after deep trauma, as long as there is effort and emotional honesty. Throughout this period, I developed tools to manage my anxiety and fear. Breathing techniques, therapeutic writing, meditation, and intense physical training became essential allies. Each small victory, whether it was facing a school day, expressing a feeling, or establishing clear boundaries with Marina, strengthened my self-confidence. I realized that overcoming challenges isn't a single act, but a series of small, consistent, daily choices that shape who you are. The feeling of being in control of my own life, albeit gradually, brought me a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. I also discovered the importance of surrounding myself with people who genuinely support me, friends and professionals who truly listen, validate, and encourage my growth. The most significant moment of this phase was realizing that my suffering did not define my life, and that my choices, my responses to challenges, and my determination would shape who I would become. The pain of the past still existed, but no longer as an emotional prison. I learned to transform anger into motivation, fear into vigilance, and sadness into self-understanding. The process of emotional reconstruction taught me that it is possible to rebuild a family, even if imperfectly, and that overcoming grief does not require forgetting, but rather the courage to face what was experienced and draw learning and strength from it. I began to feel like the protagonist of my own story, realizing that despite the scars, there was room for joy, growth, and new achievements. Over time, I began to notice concrete changes in my routine and my own attitude toward life. Before, any criticism or disagreement would paralyze me. Now, I could take a deep breath, reflect, and respond firmly without losing emotional control. Each step along this path brought me a sense of autonomy I'd never known before. In my daily activities, I realized I could choose how to react, and that my decisions didn't need to be determined by fear or Marina's manipulation. This didn't mean my relationship with her had become perfect, but I now had tools to protect my sanity and self-esteem. The feeling of finally being in control of my own emotions and actions was liberating, and it gave me the confidence to face situations that had previously deeply frightened me. A moment that profoundly impacted my resilience was when I participated in a major basketball tournament. Normally, external pressure and internal anxiety left me vulnerable to failure and criticism, but this time, I was able to focus entirely on my performance without the painful memories or fear of Marina paralyzing me. Every dribble, every pass, and every point scored was, in a way, a symbol of my resilience. I felt like I was transforming pain into action, frustration into positive energy, and that I was finally recognizing my own worth. At the end of the game, even though I was tired, I felt a pure and genuine joy, one that didn't depend on anyone's approval. It was the first time in years I felt proud of myself, not for surviving, but for actually achieving something despite the chaos surrounding me. Gradually, my relationship with my family began to reconfigure itself. My mother and father made constant efforts to listen and support my choices. Marina, with therapeutic support, began to acknowledge her mistakes and work through her own anger and impulsiveness. Of course, there were still challenges and tense moments, but they began to be faced in a healthier way. I learned that rebuilding a family isn't linear. It involves mistakes, setbacks, and a lot of emotional work. But I also realized it was possible to create a safer and more balanced environment where each member could feel respected. This awareness brought me hope and the feeling that my voice and my emotions finally mattered. One of the most valuable lessons was recognizing that overcoming doesn't mean forgetting what happened or ignoring the pain. On the contrary, it means accepting the past, understanding its consequences, and using this experience as a foundation to build something better. I developed a deeper understanding of boundaries, empathy, and resilience. I discovered that I can face external and internal challenges with strength, but that I can also ask for help when needed without feeling ashamed. Every victory, even a small one, like a successful dialogue with Marina or the open expression of my feelings with my parents, became a milestone in my journey of emotional strengthening. Today, I can look back and realize that my story is not defined by the abuse I suffered, but by the strength I found within myself to overcome each obstacle. I'm proud of how I've evolved emotionally, how I've learned to value my emotions, set boundaries, and fight for my well-being. I've learned that even in the most difficult situations, it's possible to find hope, and that overcoming obstacles is built step by step with courage, patience, and determination. I still deal with some emotional scars, but they don't stop me from growing, living fully, and building healthier relationships. My life today is marked by the knowledge that I can face any adversity, as long as I maintain faith in myself and the strength I've discovered throughout this journey. As time passed, I realized my inner strength was becoming increasingly consolidated. It wasn't just about surviving Marina's provocations, but about knowing myself deeply and recognizing my own worth. Every tense situation, every argument, and every challenge I faced at home became a learning opportunity. I learned to identify patterns, anticipate conflicts, and choose my reactions consciously rather than acting on impulse or fear. This skill became essential not only for dealing with my sister, but also for facing other challenges in life, from school to social relationships and important personal decisions. I felt I was finally building a solid foundation of self-esteem and resilience that would stay with me forever. During the family supervision phase, I realized that justice and protection were not just external mechanisms, but also tools for strengthening my own sense of safety. The presence of Catherine, Nicola, and Kathy was crucial in helping me understand that I had rights, that my pain was legitimate, and that I didn't have to carry the weight of what was happening alone. This gave me the courage to express my feelings, confront unfair situations, and even help Marina deal with her own emotions when appropriate. The learning was twofold: to protect myself and to understand that forgiveness is a choice, but should not be confused with allowing abuse. This distinction was crucial to my emotional maturity. My relationship with sports evolved significantly. Before, basketball was merely an escape. Now, it was also a reflection of my emotional growth. Each practice, each game, each achievement came to symbolize not only physical skill, but also endurance, patience, and self-control. I realized that my mind and body were aligned in a way that gave me confidence and pride. The feeling that I could face any challenge without being limited by fear or the past began to permeate other areas of my life. This balance between physical and emotional strength was a powerful discovery that would stay with me forever. Looking back, I see that the journey of overcoming was not linear. There were times when I thought about giving up, shutting myself away, and hiding from the world. There were days when the anger and sadness seemed unbearable, but each small victory, each courageous step, each honest dialogue, and each effort to protect my sanity shaped the person I am today. I learned the importance of valuing my emotions, setting boundaries, trusting qualified professionals, and above all, believing in my ability to overcome. Overcoming revealed itself not as an endpoint, but as a continuous process of growth. Today, I can say that my story is marked by victory over fear, manipulation, and the silent pain I carried for so long. I have become a resilient teenager, capable of facing challenges with clarity and determination, and with a deep understanding of myself. My life goes on, and painful memories still exist, but they do not define my present or limit my future. I have discovered that strength lies not in avoiding pain, but in learning to transform it into growth and hope. I share my experience with the online community to show that even in the darkest moments, it is possible to find light, resilience, and a path of overcoming that leads us to a fuller and more conscious life.